was on a business trip that had me staying at a quaint older hotel, combining a little work with a little relaxation. The room was nicely equipped and the bed was very soft and comfortable. All in all, I had a great place for getting a little work done, while also getting some quality rest and relaxation. On my first night there, I was shutting down for the night and getting ready for bed when the phone rang. No one knows where I'm staying, and anybody that would know would call my cell phone, not the hotel phone. But the phone continued to ring. I was hesitant to answer, but then got concerned that maybe something had happened in my car. So I finally picked up the phone and answered. When I did, I heard the voice of a young boy. He could have been between 8 and 12 years old. All I knew was that he sounded like he was in some kind of distress. He asked me why he felt so cold and why it was so dark where he was. Thought it might be a prank, but some intuition told me it was real. This kid sounded really upset. After a few seconds, he stopped talking, and I thought I heard him crying. I found this more than a little disturbing, but there's a part of me that felt guilty about even considering hanging up. So I continued to listen. Finally, I asked him where his parents were, but he turned it around and asked me if I knew where they were. This was getting a little too freaky for me. I felt helpless. The kid sounded like he was in really bad shape, but suddenly the line went dead and I was left holding the receiver in my hand. I went out into the hall and looked around for a minute or two, thinking he could be in the hotel. But it was the middle of the night, and I certainly wasn't knocking any doors at that time. I went back to my room and tried to settle down. I found it hard to sleep, but finally did. I was only asleep for about an hour when the phone rang again. If I hadn't been half asleep, I probably wouldn't have answered it. It was the boy again, and this time, he asked me if I could come and get him. He was alone, and where he was, it was dark and cold. He said he missed his parents. Again, I felt useless and told him he should call the police, but that only made him cry more. He said I was the only person who could help him. I asked him if he was in the hotel, and he said yes, but he didn't know the room number. Again, knocking on doors in the middle of the night was out of the question. Then, like before, the line went dead. I called the front desk, and someone who sounded like they were half asleep answered. I explained what had happened, but they acted like they couldn't do anything. They were just the night clerk and suggested I take it up with the manager in the morning. The rest of the night was spent in a fitful sleep. After I got up in the morning, I got ready and went down to the main desk. I asked for the manager, and when they came out, I told them what had happened. The woman got a strange look on her face and asked if she could speak to me in private. What could I say but yes? We went to a sitting area and she explained that a young boy had died in one of the rooms a few years ago while his parents were out for dinner. It was a very bad scene. The problem was that over the years, patrons staying at the hotel got these phone calls, and it was very disturbing. I didn't know what to say, but I finally asked what room the boy died in. The manager was quiet for a moment. Then she said it was my room. Again, I was left without words. Needless to say, I asked to be moved, and they honored that request. But that night, I spent a lot of time waiting for the phone to ring. I was traveling alone for a freelance business trip. To keep expenses down, I stayed at budget hotels. They weren't totally low rent though, and I made sure they were in decent areas. Still, my story will go to prove that there's no place where trouble can't find you. Before checking in, I went to a local diner that was close to the hotel because I was sick and tired of fast food. I decided to sit at the counter since I was alone. A big burly guy sat down next to me and was a little uncomfortable because he was very close to me. But he turned out to be all right. He was a bit chatty, saying he was a traveling salesman. but he didn't offer much more than that. He did ask a lot of questions, and maybe I revealed too much. Anyway, I checked into my hotel. It was nothing fancy, but there was nothing wrong with my room, so I watched some TV and had settled down to go to sleep when I heard a noise outside my room. It sounded like someone was out there. Of course, that creeped me out. I waited, lying in bed and listening, when I heard the door make that unlocking noise like they do when someone has a key. The problem was that no one should have a key but me. I rationalized that maybe someone at the front desk may have accidentally given someone a key to my room, or maybe it was the cleaning staff. The door came open, but only so far as I had the safety lock on. The lock caught the door, but whoever was out there pressed their weight against the door, trying to force the door open. The lock emitted an ugly creaking sound like it might give way. For a moment, I was frozen in fear, but some survival instinct inside me kicked in, and I leapt out of bed. I was across the room in 2 seconds, and I rammed my shoulder against the door, slamming it shut. I shouted through the door that there was someone in the room. When I looked through the people, I saw the man from the diner standing in the hall, and he did not look happy. Really, he looked more than a little pissed. But I watched as his expression changed, and then he said my name and asked me to let him into the room. He made it seem so familiar, like a husband talking to a wife. I could tell that he was putting on an act, the exasperated husband, waiting for his wife to let him in the room. He knocked on the door and said, "Come on, honey, let me in." I finally got up the courage and shouted through the door that there was no way I was opening my door and that I was on the phone with the police. Of course, my phone was on the nightstand next to the bed. He banged his fist on the door, which made me jump. The doors were so thin that I guessed if he tried hard enough, he could make his way inside. I heard another voice telling us, meaning the man and me, to keep it down. It must have been another guest at the hotel. When I looked at the people, the man had disappeared from view. I assumed he was gone, so I went to the phone and called the front desk. The person there said a large man just ran out the front door. I asked them why they gave the man a key to my room, but they didn't have a good answer. I arranged to be moved to another room, but barely slept that night. As I went over the incident in my mind, I'm guessing that the man must have seen my credit card when I paid at the diner, and then he followed me back to the hotel and told the front desk that he was with me to get a key. I vowed after that not to chat with any strangers and to be careful in any interactions when I was on the road, and overall, just to be a lot more careful. A couple of years ago, I was on a seemingly never-ending sales trip in my territory. I was close to wrapping up the trip when I ended up in a very cozy hotel with a lot of old world charm. I'd stayed there before and found it very comfortable. That was until this stay. The rooms at this hotel have these two unique features that I'm not seeing in any other hotels. One of them is a fake fireplace. It's electric, and while it doesn't put out any heat, I find it comforting, especially on cold winter nights like the night I was staying there. The other feature were these motion sensor lights at the bottoms of the nightstands on each side of the bed. Every time you got out of bed, these little lights pop on and give just enough light to navigate during late night trips to the bathroom. On one night after I went to sleep, I kept getting these flashes of light out of the corner of my eye. I wondered what they could be, till I realized it had to be the motion sensor lights beside the bed. The problem was that I was the only person in the room, and I was still in bed. I turned on the light and checked the room, but it was empty except for me. So I went back to sleep, but it was a restless one. About an hour later, I caught the light flashes again, and this woke me up. My position on the bed gave me a clear view of the door. The only light there was the light that came through the peephole. I fixated on the peephole for several seconds, but then I got a little shocked when the peephole went black. There was no slider on the peephole, and besides, if there was one, someone would have to manually close it. And I was in bed. That meant something was standing between me and the peephole. My heart began to hammer inside my chest, and I was fully awake. The peephole reappeared, but I let my eyes drift to the fireplace. That was when I saw a pair of legs walk in front of it. If my heart was beating fast before, it was now going like a jackhammer. I flipped on the light, but there was no one in the room except for me. I finally convinced myself that the figure in front of the fireplace had to be in my mind. That was the only way I could go back to sleep. But in truth, sleep was impossible. I tried, but the motion sensor light came on again, and when I looked toward the fireplace, I saw something or someone move in front of it. I flipped on the light and again found the room empty, but that was it for me. I called the front desk and asked to be moved to another room. I truly felt they would have put up some resistance, but I caught something behind the tone of the person working the desk that night, that this wasn't a unique occurrence. I did get moved. Why it took some time to get back to sleep, I was finally able to do that without any other disturbances. I decided if I stayed there again in the future, I would definitely avoid that room.